What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. I have hosted and produced over 2,000 epic conversations over the last 10 years. And what makes our conversations epic? We don't do interviews. We do conversations. Hey, everybody. My name is Dr. Vibe. I am the host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show. I'm also host and producer of a number of shows that I'll mention at the end. I'm also a certified men's empowerment coach, and I help men get empowerment in their lives that they become better men and better servants for those of the world. For those who have not been here before, this is our weekly manhood conversation. I was going to say chat, but it's conversation that we have every Tuesday night, most Tuesday nights from 8:30 to 9:30 and whatever time it is after Eastern time. And I'm very blessed to have, as always, we have Glenn Barker from the Mankind Project in Chicago. And we also have Dr. Marvin Thompson from the Lighthouse Education Project in New Orleans. I'd like to say thank you for everyone who has already logged on to the conversation. Thank you so much. This is just outstanding and really appreciate it. And we're going to make sure if you want to get on tonight, we're going to get you on because we're going to condense the lockdown seat time tonight and really open it up. So, Glenn, a short little bit about yourself, then Dr. Thompson, a short little bit about yourself, and then Glenn, let's get right into the conversation.
All right, then. Thank you all, and thank you for joining us and wanting to be educated as well as informed about the inner workings, this series of men. I'm Glenn Barker. I'm with the Mankind Project. And we're an international nonprofit that holds over 200 trainings a year. There's 50,000 men involved. And the point is to mature each other as men, to hold our feet to the fire, and to celebrate the breakthroughs that we have in our lives. This is an important work, in my estimation, to bringing a safer, more powerful world, and men as contributors. And I'm honored to be here and bring what I can to this platform with these other great men. So that's enough about me, Dr. Thompson.
Well, I'm Dr. Thompson. I'm the CEO and president of the Lighthouse Education Foundation. And my organization is a nonprofit also that works primarily with young men and bringing forth some of the paradigms that we talk about on this show and really helping young men develop into manhood with their own sense of belonging. And we try to do that through direct experiences, not through lecturing, but literally helping them to identify themselves. That's been my life's work as an educator over 20 years, from teacher to superintendent. And it just became, as we look at our society today and see some of the struggles of our young men, it isn't so much about their environment as it is about them understanding how they influence their environment and what impact they can have. So it's great work, and I'm just glad to be a part of it.
Glenn, give us an overview of the series.
All right, so since we want to open up seats early, this is part 4 of a 4-part series. A way to look at men, I'll ask you to look at men in a certain way. Let's say we all have hardware as men. Okay, we're all born with certain potentials. And let's say that as a personality develops in young men, say there's 4 programs that can run. One is the aggressor program, the one that turns him into this warrior, the one that takes risks. And there's another program that runs that's about his magical powers, his ways to imagine and write and create and do these things. Let's just call that a program that can run. That's a power that you can have. Another one could be the compassion part, the lover, the one that makes everything human, that wants to contact, that cares and feels connected to all things. And then lastly, a king type program that's a sovereign piece of the individual. That's the one that, if developed and programmed well, gets developed into being very generative. That's the leadership part. That's the part that grows other people, takes on the responsibilities of stewarding a world beyond his own, that he looks out for others and wants to leave a legacy. These are the 4 programs that are embedded in every man's hardware when he's born. Now, how those programs develop can be very different, can they not? Like we started with the warrior. The warrior program could be used for very wonderful purposes, for getting things done, for building things. Also, it could be used for destroying things and being violent, right, and being destructive. And of course, if a man's warrior program is underdeveloped, he doesn't have the kind of strength and resolve and discipline to see things through, and possibly can't even hold up important barriers and borders and restraints for himself or people around him. So he doesn't become the protective provider even for his own well-being. And each program has these kind of potentials. You know, the lover program can run to be wonderfully human and bring compassion to everything, but it could also turn the man into an addict, because all he wants is love, and all he wants to do is satisfy that part. And of course, if man has no heart, that's a dangerous man. All right? This magician program we talked about too, when it's used creatively, look at the things that nothing was ever built or created in this world by man that wasn't first imagined. Everything that we use in our lives was once imagined. All the science, all the doctors, all the philosophy, all the stories, all the songs, all of the things we wear, use every day are by the imaginings of some person who saw that and then brought it into being. That's the magician. That's also the healer. The part that creates something special in rituals. We see it in priests, we see it in doctors that create a healing environment. And we do rites of passage work too, where men have a chance to be in a magical type environment where transformation can happen. That's the realm of the magician. Now, imagine that gone wrong. To use power like that to subvert and to manipulate and control and withhold, this is the magician in shadow, we call it. These other parts are shadowy. That's not serving anyone but the person. And of course, if you don't have this imagination going for you, you suffer all kinds of ills or playing innocent. It's underdeveloped. So not to bore you with too much of these, but tonight, as the last of the 4 series, we're going to do the king archetype. So the king archetype has a purpose, and many times does not come on until later in life for men, right? So it's the archetype of ordering and blessing, right? Fertility. Things grow around the king archetype. He serves a transpersonal God or purpose. So the king is not me being king. It's me being a servant to the kingship, to do my job on behalf, the power I've been given to serve well, responsibly, those that are in, that I have a responsibility for, and the world I live in. There is a queen, of course, within every man, and that he seeks in his life as well. So what I'd like to do too is check in with our other men here, because you know it has a shadow side too, and that's a tyrant. We're going to get into this. And of course, if you don't have any kingship in you, you're not taking responsibility for your own life and those that you have charge of. So, Marvin Thompson, how have you seen the Shadow King as tyrant use authority, use his power to dictate and dominate? How have you seen it?
Well, I'm an educator, and I've been an educator for 20 years. And it's easily, anybody in a leadership position, it's really easy to either be in the fullness of the king or be in some component of the shadow part, which is the tyrant. I have actually had the misfortune of working for tyrants. And tyrants, in my experience, and whether I was working for them or observing them, had some very distinct characteristics. They were not listeners. There was no context of empathetic listening whatsoever. Their agenda was about their kingdom, and it was about getting other people to meet their standards, which we would call them standards, but they're more demands. And the consequences, I think the significant part of them that made them a tyrant wasn't so much the behavior, but the consequences for not meeting those demands. That's, to me, was what I've always seen in tyrannical behavior. It isn't so much the request or the demand in this case, but the consequences, because that's how you're judged.
Wonderful. And Dr. Vibe, have you ever seen an absence of kingships? In other words, it's called abdication. when a man will shirk his responsibilities and walk away. Have you seen abdication when it comes time to have real leadership step up? All of a sudden, the person's not there.
Continuously, and the unfortunate part of it is the situation gets worse the longer the king abdicates his throne.
Because someone else will come and take that spot. A king
Absolutely.
that abdicates leaves a void, and it leaves room for the tyrant. The last piece I'll put in about these two is when we realize that there's a shadow component, the tyrant is really a coward. If you scratch him hard enough, he'll run.
That's
well put. Well put.
Now, the coward, on the other hand, the one that doesn't show real kingship, if you push him hard enough, you'll see the tyrant come out.
Mm-hmm.
Well put.
So all of these shadow pieces have a bipolar component to them. They come with a thread. And what I want to put in this series that I think is the most important thing to know, this is wonderful information, is the only thing. What do you think makes shadow disappear?
The lover.
Yep.
I'm going to put it in a real basic term that can be put. Let's just reverse the metaphor. The only thing that takes away shadow is light.
Mm-hmm.
Any shadowy behavior, if you walk away from anything in this series, within ourselves or within someone else, is to pull the shadow into the light, to expose it. Now, you can do this in a non-shaming way, and that's the way we do it in a men's work, to pull our shadow out into the light and expose it, because it can't take the light of accountability, and that light is accountability. The light isn't a shaming exhibition. It's holding ourselves accountable to our shadowy behaviors. If I'm acting like a tyrant, my friend Marvin Thompson here will pull me aside and go, listen, this is not okay. I know you, and I know you're triggered, and whoa, I'm going to, I care enough about you to say, watch it. You're running an old tyrant program, buddy.
Yeah, and you know what's important about that, Glenn? It's not just the mere fact of saying it, but understanding that sharing is for your benefit, not mine. And I think that's an important piece when people want to call out shadows, that it's important to point out. If it's someone that you care about, it's really for their benefit. And I think even the response is always important to let them know that that's the reason why I'm having this conversation. Knowing where you want to go, knowing who you really are, know who you're trying to be. This is not working for you. I always have a choice of how I interact with it. But when I'm not with you, if this behavior continues with other people, that's where it's going to hurt you. And I think that's an important message to share in the context of calling out the shadow.
Absolutely. The work that we do here amongst each other and Dr. Thompson's work and mine in particular is to try to pull this out with dignity. Mm-hmm. And part of it is turning ourselves in. I can start complaining about something about my life and done well. In my group and with processes, I need to explain myself in such a way that has me take ownership and not be the victim here, because I contributed. Even if I feel like I'm the victim and I'm being trounced on, my king isn't there and my warrior isn't there, and I need to develop that, don't I? And that's the kind of real truth. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's the kind of real truth, right, that has to be brought to light in order for a man to grow. Remember, grown men is this tutelage. It's not instinct. We are wired to stay as boys. There's very few men naturally just progress through all of these 4 programs and somehow develop by some magical means. No, it's done by example. It's done by process. And this is what I believe has been woefully absent for many, many, many years, many generations now, in raising our young men. So it's a long way around to say there are 4 developmental stages in man, 4 programs that run, how they interact with each other, how they're grown and utilized, so the man himself feels that he is his best self when he's showing up strong, compassionate, magical, loving, creative, right, and stewardship, and he's being supported in that and blessed in that. There's a big role with other men to help foster that, And there's even a bigger role, I think, in our households, to be associated with people that know how to bless and call out shadow. To bless means
Without shame.
Without shame.
Yeah.
Without shame.
Exactly.
And this takes work. This takes work. So, what we've done in the past, and if you're all good with this, I'll call it a tyrant piece of me, and Dr. Thompson knows this well. He calls me out on it.
I'm not going to say a word. I'm going to wait to hear it. I'm not going to say a word.
You may know too much, Dr.
Well,
Thompson.
he does, and so I'll turn myself in. So I run a nonprofit, right? And I have mostly volunteers. And I know the moment my tyrant wants to come online, when I start to objectify anybody or a group.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I say those guys, that's my trigger point. I know I've flipped into desensitive. They're not people anymore. It's those guys, that group. As soon as I objectify them, I know I'm on the way to getting the blowtorch or cannibalizing my own people. I've learned this. And those around me know my posture, they know my language, and they catch me and help keep me from turning on my own people when I'm frustrated. And my real solution is to ask for the help I need. Not to be demanding. It's to ask for the help I need. And that's not an easy program to run while I'm in tyrant. that does not feel accessible to me. That's been quite a road to realize when I get triggered, it's called, and my tyrant wants to come online, and when I'm really frustrated and really had it, that I want to turn on people and devour them and spit them out. The thing to do is really, Glenn, ask for help. Yeah. Lay down and go, men, I'm tired. I can't fight this fight alone. I need you with me. Tell me you're going to step up with me. I'm out here. I'm drowning. Help me. Because that's the truth.
Yeah.
I turn into a fighter. And that serves me well. Because I can get through a lot of situations. But you know, Glenn, go ahead.
You know, some people won't do what you do, which is when you reach that point of frustration to go and say, I want help. Guys, help me. And I think there's a fear of abdicating the throne. You know, a secure king knows the throne is mine. There's no way you're taking it. I'm not walking away from it. I'm not getting off of it. And I think once a king secures it, because that's a secure king who can go ask the people that he's truly serving to help serve themselves. They're not serving him.
Right.
They're serving themselves. And I think that's what allows you once you get past those moments, that you're able to go and do that. And I think that's what stops some men from doing that. They're going to lose space. They're not secure in the space they're holding. It's an illusion of a kingship, which opens the doors to those shadows that they fall within, those shadow patterns they fall in.
What a great observation. And another that I would say too is, I know also, if you men are anything like me, to ask for the help I need really shows about what it says about me. The story I can make up is that means I'm not good enough. You see, I'm supposed to be able to do this. See, if I show you how messed up I am, you're not going to believe in me no more, and you're going to confirm everything about me that I already know, which is I'm a mess. I'm not good enough. I'm not deserving of this. This is the shadow trying to protect us. So let's not call shadow bad. Let's call shadow a behavior that just subverts the true objective, right? The best of us, because it's trying to cope in a way, because basically, men, let's admit it, we're scared. We're scared. It's scary. It's scary to be out there alone. If you really knew how messed up I was, you wouldn't want to be around me. I would lose stature in your eyes as men, right? If the women knew how messed up I was, they wouldn't love me. Right? This is a terrible setup that in part is true, but the work we do is to build up the inner man so that he realizes, like Dr. Thompson said, to incorporate other people into the mission and not be Superman. I might actually stay around longer, whatever heart attack.
Right.
People,
That's true.
you know,
One of the things I always say is every Superman has his kryptonite.
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm just going to interject here because thanks for everyone who's staying on. Really appreciate it. I have opened up a seat, so if anyone has any comments, etc., feel free. Also, there is a question from Strategic Dad saying, "So kings are secure in their seat of power?" ?
Stewarding the seat of power.
Yeah.
Stewarding.
Yeah, I think that's the goal. The goal of the king is it's a centered person. They're very centered. They know where they're going. They've already looked at the landscape, and I'm going to take you through. This is a good question, Jay. Glenn Barker took me through. This was last year. Glenn, you might remember this conversation. And this was when I was outlining my foundation. And it was a wonderful method to get me. I had all of the strategies and I had all of the concepts together, but I was stuck somewhere. Glenn, you remember this conversation, right? So I'd already established my kingdom. It's my foundation. I know what I wanted to do. I know who it's supposed to serve, and I know how I wanted to serve it. But Glenn asked me to look around, and he's in Chicago. I'm in New Orleans. And he says, "Tell me what you see." And he goes, "Look out over your kingdom and you tell me what you see." So, Jay, I was able to describe for Glenn exactly what I saw, the different parts of my kingdom that I was establishing, and everybody in it, not only what they were doing, but how they were doing it and in what manner they were engaging each other. And that vision was my kingdom. And I literally left that conversation, looked at what I had drafted as the platform for my foundation, and quickly made some adjustments, which were holding me back. It was holding me back. And Glenn, I'm going to jump into, I think, where you were heading before. I'm going to share that shadow part of my my king. And that's that passive part that Dr. Vibe, you spoke of very early. It's when things aren't perfect, I'd rather not move than not make a mistake, which means the kingdom doesn't move. That means everything falls apart. So, you can have a strong desire, have a kingdom, but then don't do anything with it. Don't serve any of the people in the kingdom. And my issue, and this is something that I've experienced my entire life, is great ideas get held up because I always perceive there could be a better way, even better than this. So, it's like paralysis by analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So there are kingdoms that don't grow. They never become, because the king never sits on the throne. He never says, "This is where I'm going. This is it." And then the commitment there to serve is already there. But the act of serving is different. So there's a difference between commitment and acting. And that's the difference between the king and any of the other levels of men we've talked about. There's always an acting component, an element in any of the archetypes that we've discussed. But the king is one that acts out of certainty. And he has already experienced good and bad. And I think, Glenn, this is why you pointed out, most men don't reach that level of kingship until later in life.
Yeah.
Because they have enough experiences to say, I know what's what. I've seen it enough. I've experienced it enough. I don't need to hear anymore. I know where I'm going.
Yeah. And he won't come online, online well unless these other three are developed in a good way. If his warrior hasn't matured to where he knows he's looking for a mission and a clean, clear mission in his life, and he knows how to use his power for good and to destroy what needs to be destroyed. If he hasn't matured in a lover where he's out of his own addictions and self-absorbedness and really looking to be the carer for others, now the King program's coming online, right? Now the man's starting to come to a place where it's about, okay, enough about me. I've got a responsibility here. I see something. I see a world that could be impacted by me stepping into, not abdicating. So, Dr. Vibe, a piece of your shadow. You have a shadow in your king where you've be tyrannical and or abdicate. You are not there on the throne. Look around. There's no king. Where is Dr. Vibe? He's disappeared.
Yeah, I think in a direct sense, probably not. But I guess in the past and still sometimes, I try to be a king on different thrones. instead of being a king on the throne that I'm meant to be on.
Oh, go into that a little bit. Go into that a little bit.
I would say that, and it's part of me. If people are on this show enough, they can tell me, they can see that I'm much a people pleaser. And what can happen sometimes is that you try to sit on many different thrones. And my analogy is you try to be in a lot of different places. You try to sit on a lot of different thrones. And then when you try to sit on a lot of different thrones, you never establish a base for your kingship because you don't spend enough time investing in your kingship and the people.
Well said.
In that.
Yeah.
Well said.
So a king doesn't necessarily a person who's ruling over one and being tyrannical. I think also a person who's not a good king can try to be many and not effective anywhere.
Mm-hmm. And a king is a good warrior. See, the king is the one that says, now let's take this from like kind of these outside kind of things and really take it in, right? Like Dr. Vibe said, I have many kings. When I'm in with a large group, my king is very, very strong. But when I'm with an individual and they go, what movie do you want to see? Or, oh, that tie, oh, that's ugly. My king is weak. It's interesting,
Exactly.
So it's interesting how there are actually, but I don't want to get off of this. There's little kings, right, in the kings, but the king program is the one that the chief archetype that says, okay, warrior, that has to be destroyed. You grab your army, do this mission. You are blessed in this mission. You're doing it for your people now, right? And the warrior can serve the king who's in service to something greater than himself, a true king, right? So the king calls the shots, and the magician is the one that makes all the wheels work. So you call on that creative part of you as a king that hits magical, and the magician comes online and you know what you got to do, but it's always with this service to the greater good. Okay, I got to manipulate some things, but it's not to trick and hurt. It is to create and move in silence because it needs to move in silence until it can be manifested. And okay, lover, says Glenn, do it in compassion. You have to not destroy what doesn't need to be destroyed, and you need to grow what needs to be grown and make that ground fertile. You bless your farmers in your life, right? You bless your hunters in your life. And you say, you've done good. You've done well. We celebrate you. Everybody, look.
Yeah.
This is a man. Look what he's done. And we're proud of you. Well done. My God, well, you know what good that does? And the women will turn to the men and say, yes, that's the man. That's my guy. I'm proud of him.
Yep.
I'm proud of him. Don't you talk about my guy. That's my guy.
Just want to people, there is an open seat. I know there are people making comments, but you can certainly come on and ask the questions live. We appreciate them on the side. I want to bring another aspect too here about, I ask and I shall receive. Van is here.
Tell us about your shadow. Van, we want to hear your shadow there.
Van is hey Van, how you doing?
I hope you are.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, Van.
Okay. Absolutely. Welcome. Thank you. You and I have been on a number of conversations. I think this may be the first time you've been in the presence of Dr. Thompson and Glenn, and they are welcome for you.
So are you communicating? Are you connecting with this King program and these other things inside of you? What do you recognize about you around your kingship or absence of kingship?
Well, I had to grow up quick because at the age of 20, 21, I was a minister. So I've had to lead from a young age. And so I guess my biggest thing that I'm noticing in society is about a year ago, I read a statistic said the average age of an Xbox player is 38 years of age. And
that's so true.
And what does that say to you? What does that say to you?
It says we're running out of kings and we got too many court jesters.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, Van. I can't tell you enough. And I'm just talking in my social circles, the women that I talk to, and even the guys. I can hang out with a group of guys, and I'm 52 years old. So my range of friends is probably 30 to my age and older. And I'm amazed at how many guys literally center their time around Xbox. And I think it speaks not to Xbox. It doesn't speak to just marketing, but I think it speaks to what you're talking about. There's a culture gap here, and there's a development gap. And I don't know, well, there's a lot of conjecture about when that occurred, but this is not a one event process. This has been a cycle. And I think this is why this discussion is so important. This has been a pattern and a cycle that has been ongoing to get us to this point for over 40 years. And it didn't happen overnight. It's been just a rapid but consistent progression towards the empowerment of men. And I'm not talking about titles and positions. I'm talking about their own growth and development, to even look at another man and know this is where I'm going to be. So it is alarming. It's scary. And I also find in those men who are sitting there with their controllers at 38, 40 years old, the absence of a connection with anything significant. There are people who haven't established a goal for their kingdom. There are people who are existing. And there are also people who have a void that needs to be filled. I don't think that they are all purposely running to their Xbox because they prefer it. I think they run to it because they don't have the capacity to be able to achieve what they want and to be supported in their efforts to achieve what they want. I've also can put men in the category who never developed. You yourself, you mentioned you're a minister. You're what, 20 at 20, right? Mm-hmm. They're men who never encountered a man, and a man had one in their life, and the men that they encountered in their daily lives were threats. They were people they didn't feel they could measure up to. Right. So the Xbox is an escape. When I look at it, what are you running from? And a lot of our men are escaping. And whether it's an Xbox or whether it's something else, these are some of the passive kings, or their kingship is. They're living literally in their shadow, and it's sad.
Exactly. So let me ask you men this. Tell me about king hunger. In other words, if in so many stories, there's always the return of the king, right? Even the Lord of the Rings, that's like the next coming of Jesus. This is the return of the king, the Arthurs. This is every president, right? In some ways. So talk to me about king projections. What is it, in your estimation, is a king projection? And tell me the effects around that, if you can. So what is king projection? Can anybody tell me? We're projecting kingship onto someone. And why? Why is that? What are we looking for? What's it about? Someone speak to that. What's the hunger, everybody?
The hunger that has a man pursue a kingship? Is that what you're suggesting? Is that the question?
That brings the quest. What is the hunger for the king in our lives? The hunger for the leader, for the Savior to come back. What is that?
Well, I'm going to connect this with what we discussed last week. And, this is the first archetype, or the first stage of a man that develops, is the lover, right? And that's early on in our lives. And I think that is the one passion. We said it last week. Never forget. My dad said this to me. Never forget what it's like to be a kid. And it wasn't until later what I understood and to truly mean, which was, what's your passion? What is it that you love? What is it that you care about? And build a kingdom around that. I think some men, when I say they didn't have a male in their presence, or a man, they may have had males in their presence, but a man in their presence is a different thing. Yeah. So I think that quest really has to come with your connection to your lover.
Absolutely.
Because that's going to be your driver.
Absolutely. So I'm going to spill the beans on this one, unless someone wants to interject. But the return of the king is really the return of the true father. Right. We're looking for daddy to come home.
Yep.
We want the big daddy to come in and straighten up the chaos. That's what we want. Father hunger, kingship, God, Savior, Redeemer, all connected to a true, beautiful version of a male masculine that's actually unachievable, but nevertheless is the hunger. And it's father hunger. The true father prayers say Father. And it's not because it's objectifying women. It's because there's a father hunger of ordering and blessing and calmness and righteousness that comes in the male, that when done well, it's beautiful. Absolutely magnificent. It's a blessing on this world. And that's what this is all about.
Glenn, you're making me think of something interesting here. Two things. First of all, Strategic Jad made a very good point saying a good father makes the best king. I would put this out there that if you're a good king, you've received seeds from a good father, not necessarily a biological father. Because I think if you're a good king, you can submit to a bigger king.
Yes. Well said.
Yeah.
Well done. Said. Well said. And that's what keeps that's what keeps our. We need a healthy ego that doesn't take us over. See, the king program.
Yes.
When any of these powers take us over, now we're possessed. When I'm a tyrant, I'm possessed by the king. I think I am king. Mm-hmm. And I think the ego has gotten a rough ride in this past generations because you need a healthy ego enough to separate yourself from the kingship. No, I'm not king. I'm on the seat holding the crown, respectful of the stewardship and that I've served someone something better, and I will take this authority and work with it the best way I know how, and not run from my responsibilities here. But I need to do the best I can in service.
Yeah,
I'm being gifted this power. This is a trust. I'm being entrusted as long as I'm the kind of king that I can say I'm using these powers in a good way. Perhaps I'll be kept on the throne as long as I am capable and worthy.
I'd like to ask Van, we started the conversation with you identifying, the average age of the Xbox user. Obviously, in your ministry, you encounter men, I'm sure, or people who are absent of this kingship. What does this conversation bring to you in your work?
I guess it varies. I really don't have that many in our congregation because I have a church where we grew up together. Most of these guys were my age. We had our kids at the same time. So we have a pretty tight group as far as, and we understood kingship a long time ago. We were trying to put ourselves in position. So when our kids came, we'd have a kingdom to raise them in. My father was, I can tell you that when my mother ever said the words, "Wait till your father gets home," I know that I went.
Okay, there you go.
I went from circuit court to Supreme Court real quick. And I watched my grandfather. He's since deceased, but my aunt one time said something to him, and my aunt was in her 40s when she said I was young. And what it was is he had chastised her child. And she says, if anybody's going to do any whipping with my children, it'll be me. And he said, if you open your mouth again, I'll spank you too.
Oh, wow.
She was 40. He was in his 70s. And he would have done it. And everybody knows he would have done it.
That sounds like it.
And so,
wow.
And the greatest story I ever heard in ministry as far as male presence was when baby elephants were killing baby white rhinos. It had never happened in history. They couldn't figure out why. And what they finally figured out was they didn't have male presence because the male adult bull elephants had been killed for their ivory.
Right.
So they flew into males to show these younger males, we don't do that. We don't kill these baby white rhinos because they were about to kill them to extinction. So if male presence works in elephants, it's got to work in humans. I mean, it's, so. Yeah.
Absolutely right. What a beautiful story. I remember hearing that. And it's true. They flew them from a couple, like San Diego Zoo or something. They flew a couple of male bulls in and dropped them in that herd. I'm going to say something about the world we live in. Look at all the chaos. Look at it in the neighborhoods. Look at it in the world. Look at all the little tyrant kings that are out there and the little dark magicians that are running these gangs and whatever else. Wherever you see chaos, there's a lack of kingship.
Exactly. Exactly.
Anywhere in the world you see chaos, it is because of lack of kingship. Because the grown men, the real men, wouldn't tolerate that for a second.
True.
This don't happen if you're within my reach.
Yeah, exactly.
Or my influence, or if I can do something about it, right? And finally, it takes a bunch of responsible men to rear up around these pockets and try to influence it, insulate it, or in some cases, we come up with the bombs, don't we? And we pull out the guns, and there's a real mess we got to clean up, and then innocence gets hurt. That's what.
Well, you know, Glenn, you and I had a discussion. I love to bring this in as a topic of as we're talking about what's current events and what's happening today. Glenn and I had a conversation last week around the concept of narratives, and if you all recall, we started this story, this series around the stories we make up. And I want to tie this together with what we all said about the absence of men, and again acknowledging the fact that this has been a 30 to 40 year process of removing manhood from our society as we know it to be across the board, where you really have to go out and look for it. This concept in the word and the use of the concept of narratives actually defines thought, right? And we have progressed from systems that remove men from our communities and our society, where now words alone can do it, where conversations alone can do it. And men, and that's the space that we used to hold. We used to hold the space of conversation. We used to hold the space of standard. We used to stand up for that. And I think that's, the things that men used to get celebrated for, that we didn't let things tear down our families, that we did not let things tear down our communities. Dr. Vibe, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I want to build on that. A few things. One of the things, I don't know if I said on a previous blab, but I ask a lot of men, how strong are you when the wind blows?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does it blow you over, or do you hold tight?
Oh man.
Because and I'll give a perfect example. Dr. T, you're in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Last I checked, there was a heavy storm named Katrina.
Yep.
That blew some people over.
Yeah.
But there's some people that are still standing.
They're still standing, and they stood up taller than I think they were before the storm.
So my question is, and this is also for the men, because we just have men watching now. Why do you feel so many have left their kingship?
I'll answer first, because I think it's easier to do nothing. I'm sorry. It's just easier to do nothing.
Yeah, no risk.
That's one.
No risk.
No risk. Number two, there's some who would want to do more, but there's no men to model it. There's none to do it. So what we see in the absence of a king, we see men just acting out, right? They're reacting. They're not responding to anything. There's a huge difference between responding and reacting. So they're reacting out of a lot of things. That's my viewpoint. And again, we're talking about generations of men, just like Van here. He grew up in a community where, manhood was established. Not only is it established, but it's nurtured. That is rare in our society. We don't have communities who uphold that standard.
And anyone else want it, like Van or Glenn or anyone who's watching this? Why is kingship? Why are kings leaving their throne?
Yeah. What's with all the apathy? What's with all the abandonment? Now, this isn't only unique in our time. I think there's always been a lack of true rightly kingship, and that's why these stories are so endearing and so powerful and so part of our psyche, because it's the true father that's really going to come back and bring order and blessing. And as long as he's right, and fertility, under the good king is where all righteousness. Now, that's also a key projection. So there is something about taking the responsibility out of ourselves and saying that's his job, right? I want a savior, and that's okay, but yet if you're abdicating your own responsibility and for your own sovereign protection and those around you, Now you're transferring your kingly duties onto Van here, and he's going to carry my king projection for me. Now Van is never going to be the king I want him to be, so what comes online often is now the king killers come out. So Van, let me ask you, ever take arrows for being a king? Whether deserved or not?
Sure.
Here you go. There's the arrow. They're coming at you. Just because you hold the king space. Tell me about that. What's that like? What's that feel like? What's it look like? Have you experienced it?
Yeah. Well, you're a target as a king. I mean, there's no
Put the
doubt
target
about
on.
it.
Right.
And I think it goes all the way back.
What's that look like to you? I mean, when it comes at you, what's the projection? And you know it's just someone made up something about you, but you're being thrown on it because you're the king.
Yeah. Well, that goes with leadership. That goes with responsibility. And if you won't be a king long if you don't have a little edge to you. You know, I mean, that's.
How do you respond to that? So what does it look like, Van? Does it look like someone says, well, you should be a leader. You should be doing this. How do you respond to that? This is your job, Van. You're supposed to clean this up.
Yeah. Well, if it's legitimate criticism, I step back and, sometimes criticism's true.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just not. It just depends. And I use a system of accountability to where, the friends that I have, the ones that I have will tell you like it is. And I'm used to that. So I know the difference between when they're really meaning tell it like it is versus criticism that's petty, I guess you'd say. But I think our problem is it goes all the way back to the tree in the Garden of Eden. Adam was passive. We've been haunted and plagued by it ever since. He was
a man that abdicated. He abdicated, didn't he? Yes, he did.
He wanted to eat that as bad as she did and was willing to let her die. He didn't eat it till he found out she didn't kill over because he didn't believe God either, right? So he was willing to put his wife in harm's way to shoulder that burden. That's what we have going on today.
Yeah. Well, in his view, he had 5 more ribs, right?
That's all. And that's what you have going today is
I couldn't pass that one.
That was good. That was good.
Yeah. That was good. In society today, men, if they advocate and they're passive, they'll let a woman take on such a burden that'll destroy her while he's not shouldering his load. That's what's wrong. I mean, in my opinion. But.
It's a good point.
Do we see that? Do we see a lot of women? There's a lot of great warrior in our women. The women of our time.
Well, there are a lot of queens out here.
Yeah.
We're growing more queens than we are kings.
Yeah.
There are more queens in our society than there are kings.
Absolutely. And as women go through this generation, many of them going to have great educations, great careers. They will be looking for men they could be proud of, right? That can hold space with them as powerful women.
Right.
And has it not? Any of you men see it go the other way? Haven't the women been carrying a lot of the masculine energy? So not only do they,
absolutely.
And this is not a criticism. This is, I hope, a relief to have women hear and understand that I see women not only carrying the feminine in the relationship, but the feminine now and the masculine in the relationship, and that must be exhausting.
Yeah.
To try to be the man and the woman in the relationship, right? Whether the father is absent or whether whatever happened, and that to carry both of those energies. Hats off to women that are really trying, but also now this is millions and millions of young boys being raised by a woman's version of a man that doesn't quite fit either, does it?
No. And, a lot of young men are rebelling against that. A lot of the anger and some of the young men that I've worked with is because there isn't that strong male presence, that they are bound and surrounded by that feminine leadership and who's holding that masculine space, and they can't connect with it. They appreciate it. They love it. And I'm not saying they don't value it, but they know there's something missing, that there's something different there, and they're angry about it. They don't know how to express it verbally because they haven't seen it. They can't say, I wish I had a dad like him. I wish I had a man who did this. And I'm going to say this, and I run an organization that does mentoring. But mentoring alone is not the answer. It's a short-term fix.
Right.
And this always seems to be the response that we have around shoring up men. Let me say something. You know what mentoring is? It is the first example that these young men have that men like that actually exist.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is.
Well said.
That's what it is. And this is why it's not about just showing up. It's giving them an experience that really, that really motivates them and empowers them. And there's a difference between motivating. Motivating gets you interested in something. Empowering gets you moving towards it, right? And giving you tools and knowledge that can't be taken from you. And that's what our young men are missing today. Bullying behavior, I got to tell you, in my 20-some years as an educator, every time I encountered a bully, I think somebody said it earlier in the show, Glenn, I think it was you, all he has to do is be stood up to, and it's done. But when I get the families in, I'm going to tell you what I find. I'm going to say it. I find weak men whose significant other is holding the masculine space.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Or I find a tyrant.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the only two things I find.
Absolutely.
There's nothing in the middle. They're always at the extreme. And the weak, passive dad, I can't tell you how difficult it is to close the door, look at him and say, look, man, what? Or the tyrant, I find out just what the other kid had to deal with on the playground and stand up to him. I've got to close the door and look the bully in the face and go, look, this is my school. You don't run anything here. Those are things that our young men just don't see, but they manifest themselves in everything that we see going on in our young people today, and nobody's paying attention to it. We'll put all of our energies in one direction. It's like, you bring a report card home and your mom says you're failing in math. You got to pull it up. So next time you went from an F to a B, but by the way, your English grade, your science grade, and your history grade dropped, right? And that's where we are in our society. We focus so much on so many other things. We forgot the foundation of a society. We forgot the foundation of a family. We forgot the foundation that keeps a society together. Men are the fabric. We are a key fabric of the society. And I'm not talking about males. It's about the manhood in that male.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask the gentlemen that are on live here and the gentlemen who are watching, do you have someone that you have ready to pass your kingship to? And do you feel comfortable? If I came to you and said, do you have someone you have ready to pass your kingship to? Do you have someone there to pass your kingship to?
Good question.
Is that for our listeners or for the panel?
And it's for everybody. And what kind of state is your kingship if you had to pass it today?
Yeah. Who's your successor?
Mm-hmm.
Every success should have a successor. I say that all the time. And I say to people, when Steve Jobs passed away, they had someone named Tim Cook there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that after my father passes away, he has set up a kingship for me to continue the dynasty, for lack of a better word.
Right.
So do we as men realize the importance of having our kinship in place, because we're not going to be around forever.
Yeah. Right.
That's true. That's true.
And we want to make sure as much as possible that kinship is in good enough status that next person won't look and say, what kind of king was he?
I got to clean up this guy's mess.
Right.
Exactly. Because one of my mentors told me a long time ago, if you sort of do something, it's going to be a mess.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if you don't, and he said, here's a perfect example. When you sort of go to the bathroom, it's a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I'll answer your question. My kingship, I get up every day, is I'm preparing to turn over to my son, and that's how I raise him. And I can say this, and I love doing this. My measurement of the status of my kingdom, I never guess. I always ask him. And one of the things that I do with my son that I think has made me a better man in the process of raising him this way is I literally share with him my goals, objectives, frustrations, and next steps. And along the way, I will get a gem from him that blows me away. And it's so simple. Dad, why don't you try this? Have you thought about this? Those things reinforce to me that he has a capacity to further whatever I've started. One. Two, he's had the direct contact and experience and knowing the thought processes. And that doesn't mean he has to think like me, because I know he doesn't. He's going to be able to toss, Dad, I wouldn't do that. And sometimes he doesn't say anything because he goes, it's your kingdom, but I can tell I wouldn't do it that way. But that's the beauty of having that relationship. So I think I think I felt very good about answering your question and I felt good that in that assessment, because I think that's one of the things that's missing.
It is for me too. I have an organization here that we've pulled a lot of things together over the years, and I've gone through 4 possible replacements for me that after 6 months said, no, I don't want the job. It's too.
Wow.
I can't. I'm not cut out for this work. And so I stay another year, and I stay, and they asked me to stay another year, and now they're going to ask me to stay another year. So that's one or two things. Either, well, at first I was very flattered, and now I also know that I have to grow the other parts of my organization so that I'm not the center of the universe. I'm not the Axis Monday. Mm-hmm. So many things don't revolve around me, so that it doesn't look as daunting to a successor. And I think that's what I'm starting to do this year, to see how many things I can move out of my realm into the other areas, so they can be a little more self-sufficient, so that the job isn't become mythos, right, and it's just an impossible something for someone else to fill.
Right.
And it gets back to something I shared earlier, that you don't want to have to be a kingship on many thrones, because you can only spread yourself so thin. And you don't want, because then if you have so many kingdoms, you can't be everywhere.
And it's part of my shadow piece, my own shadow piece, because I get rewarded for doing all these great things, and so I want to do them. Truth of it is, if I take my foot off the gas pedal anywhere, it dies. This is not a recipe for succession. And we're almost out of time, everybody. So I have to wrap up the show.
Yeah. Glenn is going to be taking off. We will continue on. I don't know if we'll keep it recording or not, but we'll certainly be keeping it on. Glenn, some final words from you.
So thank you for joining us in this 4-part series. Please look back at these archives with great discussions, but it's only scratching the surface. I was hoping, and our group is hoping, to give you some insight into looking inward to 4 programs that we run that could be developed and reprogrammed. I believe we're hardwired for these, but I don't believe they can't be rewritten. I've seen it. I've seen it in men's hearts and in their behaviors and in their lives. We are not stuck, but we need the presence of other good men and supportive women and community that does that. So, if you are wanting to start a men's group in your community, in your town, right, in your government, in your business, in your church, call me, Glenn Barker, the Mankind Project, at 312-243-6743. 312-243-6743. You can find Glenn Barker on Facebook, MKP Chicago's on Twitter. Thank you for having me. See you next time. Bye for now.
Before you leave, Glenn, I'm going to just share one final word. As we talk about kingship, there's at least 3 qualities a good king needs to have. He has to have faith, because it's more than him, and it's going to take more than him. He's got to have hope, that he has to believe that tomorrow will be better than today. And also he needs to have love, because the foundation of everything is love. I just wanted to share that with you.
I'll add courage.
And courage. Yep. I'll agree with that. Those are 4 key things. Glenn, be well.
Thank you. Bye for now.
All right, Glenn.
Cheers, Glenn.
Okay, so we have an open seat for anyone who wants to join us. Still got the recording going. So if anyone wants to continue the conversation about kingship, we'll go on for another few moments. If anyone wants to take a seat. Van, anything else, any more you want to share? Dr. T, any more you want to share?
You know, this has been a great conversation. This series has just been really enlightening. I think every time I go through this, every time we have these shows, I always learn a new piece about this. It's not so much from what we say, but even this platform has been great because it just broadened the perspective of others who are out there seeing the same thing and just reinforcing it. But, you know, one of the things about the kingship that I think doesn't connect with women, and I think our society has literally shaped it to make it difficult, is that as we've grown a greater number of queens and they're assuming this masculine, holding this masculine space, there's almost a reluctance to relinquish what they've gained. And, you know, and you can call it empowerment. I think that word is overused many times. And much of it's been out of necessity. It's not like we've been there trying to, you know, they took something from us. We abdicated it. And I think Van said that earlier. You know, we abdicated that space. So as much as men think about, you know, establishing that kingship, it also has to think about what's already been taken, what's already in place, and how do you do that without creating other issues. I think that's also a key component. I don't, you know, this show isn't about men going out and saying, look, I'm the man here. I want it this way. That isn't the conversation, but it's about personal growth and self-growth. And I think as we listen and hear this, let's be strategic about how you think about this concept, but most importantly, how you go act on it.
Excellent. We are joined by Jay, who he's becoming a regular contributor, and we like that.
Good to see you, Jay.
I was trying to hang back and let other people
Jay,
tonight. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Well, what do you have to share tonight, my brother?
I was thinking about Glenn's earlier question about outing ourselves, about our possible tyrannicalness, you know. And I was thinking, I think the times in my past when I've acted that way, it's when I cared more about being right than the person's heart that I was dealing with, you know, and that was pretty tyrannical of myself. And then when I switched that around, when I became more concerned about their heart, about winning their heart, I became a much better king, especially to my children.
Yeah. That's, you know, that narrative part that I mentioned earlier, you know, we have this desire. We're always thinking ahead. We're not really listening because listening means I'm not threatened by anything you're going to say. Right? I'm not threatened. Kings can hold their space. I'm not worried. But when people start talking and you're already starting to prepare an answer, there's a fear. There's a lack of genuineness in the dialogue that automatically just puts you at odds. And it becomes a power struggle. And that's the danger in narratives to me. Narratives automatically define a position and force you to tear down a position.
Yeah.
It's not a dialogue. I've established a narrative. Here it is. That's my position. What are you going to do with it?
That's right.
Now I'm either going to accept it or I'm going to tear it down. Yeah, exactly. But that's, you know, Jay, you're absolutely right. But to get to move to that other space, it's got to be built into your consciousness to be aware of it. You know, Glenn always uses the term, do your work. Mm-hmm. Dr. Vibe, you know, he's mentioned that many times. Doing your work is a daily thing. It's not just getting up every day, going through the motions. That's how we got here. We haven't done our work. We haven't held that empathy. We haven't been good listeners. We haven't been good leaders. We haven't held that space with enough consistency that we can be validated as credible. Yeah. We can't be validated as credible kings. There aren't enough of us who've done that.
That's why it's so important to have that father source, you know, that father figure.
Oh yeah.
You know, my relationship with God as becoming my father figure for most of my life. That's how I did the work, was letting him work on my heart, let him work on my attitude, work on, well, everything. everything needed to be fixed.
Right.
And still does in some cases. And he brought strategic men into my life that became father figures that, you know, showed me how to do things, you know, how to listen, how to care for people's hearts. And it was invaluable training for me. But if I didn't do the work alongside of that, none of this is possible.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I'm going to bring up, there's been a lot of things that have been going on lately with me, and the term king, we really have to know what a king is and when to be a king. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give there's a number of examples that have hit recently, but a very good friend of mine had lost his father recently, and they had a memorial this past Saturday. And he told me last week, you know, could you come? And if we're having an open mic, so if you have something to say, go ahead. And there I was in the church, and the time came for people to say their things. And I just said, you know, this is time for me to be a king, because my friend has asked me to serve.
Right.
So I want the men and those who love them are watching this. A king doesn't have to be something ostentatious.
Right.
Is that something huge?
Yeah.
A king can be simple.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I'm glad you said that.
Go ahead.
No, Dr. Vibe, you're dead on. I had that thought earlier, and Glenn was on a roll, and I didn't want to interrupt him. I think there's a fallacy here that the king means I'm in charge. And,
right.
You know, there are going to be people who hear that and who are going to watch this and go, you know, and sit down with their significant other or their spouse and go, you need to hear this. I'm the king, and I'm going to take back, dude, you're going to get hurt. That's not what this is about. And there are spaces that we hold. You know, my dad was probably the best example I ever saw of a true king, because he was secure in abdicating certain duties in certain spaces. For example, in our home, my dad abdicated the house to my mother. That's her domain. When all four men, him and the three boys, walk in, she's in charge. In that home, he took back space when she stepped over the boundaries of directing his three boys. I'm going to say that again. The house was hers. He did the cooking every day. This is a 6'2", 250-pound Marine. When he walked in the door, he started dinner. He cooked the dinner. Yes, dear. No, dear. Yes, honey. But when she crossed boundaries with her three boys about giving direction and badgering and whatever, he's like, okay, that's enough.
Yeah.
You know, that's kingship to me. He didn't have to be in charge of every little thing, but he had to know what his kingdom was.
Yeah.
And his kingdom were his three boys, what he expected of them as boys into men, and nothing was going to interfere with that. Mm-hmm. And to me, when in this dialogue, in this conversation, that's the space that I think our men have not held strongly enough. And why women have moved into holding some of that masculine space for our young boys and girls, because I got to tell you that, you know, that king is equally powerful for young girls as it is for boys. The absence of a king in a girl's life can be just as destructive as the absence in a boy's life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I know, Dr. Vibe, you know, I think a king is more powerful when he is serving. I mean, when he is humble and when he serves, man, he can change the course of people's lives. You know, it's just amazing. Yeah. Amazing. And, man, I got to go. Thanks for letting me drop on for a few minutes. I just want to say, hey, you guys
Good to see you, Jay.
The bomb. You guys teach me so much. So thanks so much. And God bless you.
And Jay, we'll be in touch, Jay.
Okay, I appreciate that. Bye, all.
Be good, Jay.
Take care. Another seat is open up if someone wants to come on. I know that Tony is out there. Askia Jones is out there.
Yeah.
You know, like as I'll take kingship to another area too. A lot of people compliment me, and I appreciate that. for doing these type of shows. And they say that you're the king of doing this, you're king of that. I just provide a platform. Everyone who comes on here, if it's a man, they're a king. If they're a lady, they're a queen. Mm-hmm. I hand it over to them. I don't talk about something. Seat is locked. Well, we lost Van. That's okay, no problem. Streaming voice. I don't have any locked seats right now. Yeah. So he's back. So Tony's on now. Okay, there we go.
Hello, gentlemen.
Get ready to see Tony.
Hey, Tony.
He's hiding. Hey, Tony, what's up?
How you guys doing?
Doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I've been riding all day. I went to pick my youngest son up from college. He's home for the break. And nice. We stopped for dinner. And so I actually tuned into the broadcast when it first began, and I couldn't hear a thing for all the noise in the restaurant. So I'm definitely going to have to check out the replay. I put a question in the chat, and I was just wondering, and the reason why I put the question in the chat, and you guys can tell me if it was already discussed, is because a lot of times when we are exercising our kingship as men, and then traumatic things happen, and we sort of shift from recognizing whether or not we're actually a king based on what has happened to us. And an example I would use is sometimes, we have a particular role, we have a job, and we lose that job. And our identity is so connected to that job that sometimes we lose ourselves because we are no longer connected to that job. And so I was wondering if you guys discussed that tonight. And if you did, I'll definitely check it out in the replay. But if you haven't, I was wondering if we could sort of push the envelope. And I'll tell you sure. Where I'm headed with this. A lot of times, we've talked in the past about, Black men and suicide. And I still think that particularly when you focus on the veterans who, come back and, their kingship was sort of connected to them being soldiers and, waging war. They were warriors. And so it's difficult a lot of times, even when there's not mental anguish about, what they had to do as far as being a warrior, of integrating themselves back into society and not be that kind of warrior any longer. So I just wanted to sort of put that out there and see what you guys think.
That's a great topic. And I don't, and not only in a sense of being on the battlefield, but also if just say you have a position in the workplace of power, right, and you lose that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. We, as many men, take that, especially corporately, they are the king. They're the king of the workplace, and the rug is pulled out underneath their feet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why I had mentioned those things to Glenn, the characteristics of a good king. He has to be a warrior, but he also has to have faith, hope, and love. He can't just put all his energies in one of those quadrants.
Right.
He has to be well-rounded, and it's a continuous journey.
Well,
I encourage men to know where their there is, but I never want them to get to their there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And especially when it comes to the workplace, we all here are watching, and as I see, it's all men here.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a feeling that most of us have had that experience, whether it's on the battlefield or in the workplace, or in the family that you just outlined?
Well, those are excellent examples, Tony. And my first thought as you were talking were, Dr. Vibe's exactly right. And I saw Van nodding. When you put everything into that as your self-worth, when you lose it, it's a risk. It's something that should never be done. But the other side of this that I want to point out is we've had this discussion about the 4 archetypes. You're not just a king. You're also a warrior. You're also a magician. You're also a lover. And this is the beauty of it. And I'm glad your question brings us all together. The man who loses his job, who loses his position, he wasn't born with a crown on his head. He acquired that crown by developing all parts of him. So he knows how to tap into that magician again. So we don't always stay in king. Sometimes, and Glenn mentioned it earlier, sometimes you've seen it in movies. The king has to get off the throne, pick up his sword, and this time, instead of sending the army, he's got to go lead the army, right? And that's what happens when we have to recognize that this place that we are now, number one, it is not a destination. Where I am now is not a destination. So when the other place happens, that means I'm going somewhere else. And we've got to tap into all the other parts that made us who we are, that got us to where we're going. And I love the comment about the warrior, the soldier, because I think the same dynamic applies to our society. You guys have been in the airport, you travel, every time you see a guy in uniform, they go, hey guys, let's applaud for him. But when does that happen any other time, right? We start a war. My dad was a Marine for 32 years. You hear me? My dad fought 3 tours of Vietnam and Beirut and you name it. We thought he was blown up in Beirut, all kinds of things. I'm telling you, as a military brat who's traveled all over this country, my dad used to say it all the time, and he used to tell his men this: do not get caught up in the social clamor around any war, anything at all. He would tell me and my family, don't be doing the yellow ribbon stuff. Forget all that, because it is nothing but marketing. It is nothing but this. And these are from soldiers who understood this. So the soldier who comes back and who's looking for society to give him something because he risked it, they weren't there when he signed up. They didn't encourage him to sign up. They don't know anything about the training that he goes through. They have no idea the risk of military people, the number of military people we lose every single day around the world just doing their daily training exercises. We're not celebrating them then. They die every single day preparing for war. One of my dad's job was to go to people's homes when he was a first sergeant and inform the parents that their soldier, their child is gone. One of the hardest jobs he ever had. That happens every single day. So I think the context for the soldier, he's always, whether we're in a war or not, he's risking his life every day. That's not the person he encounters at the store or the airport. Everybody in our society and our culture should respect the fact that these people risk their lives every single day. And when I tell you, you ought to, if you ever get a hold of the Navy Times, which is all the Marine Corps and the Navy, people die on an aircraft carrier every single day. And it's one of the most dangerous places in the world. So, the idea of the soldier wanting us to come back, he's fighting for us, but he should never expect us to celebrate him the way he needs to be. And that's something my dad always used to tell my brothers and I, but he used to always tell his soldiers, don't expect to be celebrated the way you want to be, and don't do it for that reason.
Wow.
I read a book years ago, and it changed my life on raising my kids. And it was speaking to the fact that in America, you do not have a cutoff age of when a man becomes a man. You drive when you're 16, you vote when you're 18, you can drink when you're 21, blah, blah, blah. And most other cultures do. It's usually around the age of 12. So having read this book, I went ahead and set my family up that when you turn 12, you will be celebrated. and you're going to have your father's blessing. And I'm not going to wait on the world to give it to you, because just like you said about your father, there's no guarantee you're going to get it.
Right.
But there is a guarantee that I can give it. And so all of my children, when they turned 12, I started them a checking account, because I'm not going to wait till they're 18 and go to college and let them learn about finances.
You're talking about being a king, sir. You're being a king there.
And I said that. Smart. I said that way, when it's time to leave the kingdom and you establish your own, you'll have wealth. You'll have the things it takes to be a king. And every one of my children had a quote that I gave them, and every day when they open their door, they see it. And it's one that I gave them. Their daddy gave them that. And so they're already affirmed by dad. They're not going to have to go look for it anywhere else.
Yeah. I'm just going to bring up a question that Regeneration LBC has. And if anyone would like to come on, just send me a message. And I know that Van or Tony will be there.
I'm going to hop off. I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to hop off in a little bit so they can have my seat in about 10 minutes.
I'm going to hop off now.
Okay, yeah. We're going to go into the okay, Van, thank you so much. No problem.
Van, pleasure meeting you, man. Hope to see you again.
Yes, sir. Take care.
You will.
You too, my
Tony,
friend.
what's up? I can't hear you. Can't hear you. I'm going to just give the question that Regeneration LBC has. What should be the first thing we do as boys, men, the moment we actually realize that we are kings and have positive authority and responsibility? What do we do in our first moments of power? Sets the standard of how we exercise power. Good question. Regeneration X, why don't you come on and answer your own question and and give us your thoughts? There is a seat open. Tony, I don't know if I'm hearing.
Yeah, I just want to make one point. My wife was doing a lot of talking in the background side. So I wanted to say that also we should talk about all the kings that are walking around that are homeless. And maybe you guys talked about that too.
No, we didn't.
But we'll do a blab on that subject.
Okay.
We will do that.
Okay. I will chat and give somebody else a chance to come in too.
No problem. You take care, my brother. Thanks again for the support. Good stuff. And then he comes the homeless king. I love that.
Yeah, we got to save that
one. And like I said, gentlemen, anyway, if you have any subjects that you want us to discuss, we will discuss them. Like I said, go ahead.
No, Tony brought up the homeless kings, and I just read an article today that, the average person walking the streets today that's considered homeless are people who are making $40,000 a year. They're going to work every day, but they're homeless. So, there's a context for what Tony's question was, and I think it's one that I don't think many people assume. I think there's a quote unquote narrative out here about what is homeless and what defines homeless.
Regeneration LBC, are you going to come and join us, Dr. T? There we go.
What?
Yeah, he did. He has lost. Yeah, that's why I was hoping when he came on that he was in light. You'd see he is lean and mean.
Oh, you got to be kidding me, man.
Yeah.
Hey, John, what's going on? What's going on,
man? What'd you do?
What up?
Oh, he's very now. Tony, behave now. Don't go on too long because John just came on. Oh my God,
John, you all right?
Yes, sir. I'm good.
I just want you to see this.
Tony, yeah. Oh, go ahead,
What's
brother.
up, Tony?
Hey, John, how you doing? That's all.
Good, bro. Good.
All right, you just can't come on and show us. How'd you do it, Tony? What'd you do differently?
But now, see, John ain't gonna get any time to see. You're leaving it.
Tony is looking great, man.
I did the ketogenic diet, and basically what it does is it's a diet where you eliminate your carbs, and you can't completely eliminate carbs. You're going to get some carbs regardless, but I've reduced significantly the amount of carbs that I eat, and I eat good fat, and primarily it's protein, meats and vegetables, and it's working for me.
Good for you, man.
I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I am
so you're going to take care of that.
I'm no longer taking medication.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Wow.
Yes.
Great job, brother.
Good to see you, John.
Good to see you, man. You look well. You look real well.
Hey, now, Askia, you coming on? Come on.
How you doing, John?
Doing well, Dr. T. How you doing, man?
I'm good, brother.
Good to see you.
Hey, John, what's going on,
Dr.
man?
Vibe, man. How are you?
Blessed, highly favored, magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem, man. Just, I'm jacked.
Yes, you are.
I'm jacked, man. I'm jacked.
Yes, you are.
I'm telling you, and I'm taking all of the people that are still on this call. I'm taking you with me. So get ready.
Hey, John, how much of the conversation did you get to see tonight or get to hear?
I've been tracking for about 15 or 20 minutes now.
Okay.
You had a question. I want you to, what is the answer that you have for that question? I want other people to follow.
You know, the thing that I knew you were going to get me like that, so I put some thought to it. So
good.
So the thing that came to mind was, at the same time that we are coming into power, at the same time that we actually discover our presence and our authority, the important thing is to grab hold of humility, and also learning really how to wield that power. And that means whether not exercising it with some aggression, sometimes with assertion, with assertiveness, I would say, and also knowing when to hold your sword and when to simply be present. And you said something, Dr. T, that I say all the time, and I'll say it in a different fashion. You have to understand how to and when to control your space.
Yeah, it's huge. You know, a lot of times guys act out because that's what they think's expected. It goes back to, you know, Tony brought up, you know, how men feel afterwards. I don't get my feelings. I don't teach my kids. I don't teach the young men I work with to gauge themselves on everyone else's opinions, on everyone else's needs. If you can't hold your space first, you're no good to anybody.
That's right.
You're no good to anyone, because you're either going to be manipulated, you're going to be controlled, and at some point, you're going to get frustrated, and all those shadow behaviors that we talk about, they're going to show up one way or another.
They will bleed out, for real.
Yeah, they always do. And, you know, sometimes it's hard to hold space, and I'm going to for black men, it is sometimes harder to hold that space of certainty because we get judged by the larger society and viewed as being demonstrative or that angry black man in the room.
Yep.
I always tell them, when I'm confronted by this with some of the young men when they bring this forward to me, and I ask them this question: were you angry when you said it? No, I wasn't. Well, stop thinking on it. Don't let someone else's projections become internalized in you, because that's gone on far too long. Holding space doesn't mean you have to account for every projection onto you. You know, strong kings, as Glenn mentioned earlier, and they know how to take arrows. They're taking arrows because their feet are firmly planted on the ground. You can toss them all day. I know where I'm standing, and I know what my intent is and what my motive is. And that's part of that manhood undergirding.
Oh, my gosh.
That has to be developed, particularly in our young men. And when they hear that it's okay to do that, and they understand how to do that, they're more likely to do it. And that's the difference, as I said earlier, between motivating someone and empowering them. When I hear someone say, I'm a motivational speaker, well, heck, you know what? I can go down to the corner store and find somebody to motivate me. I can go hang out with homeless people and be motivated to go to work every day.
Yes.
You know, but you ain't empowering me with anything.
That's right.
And there's a huge difference.
You said something so monumental that I don't want people to miss it. I don't want people on this blab to miss it. And it's really a life lesson on how to take arrows, how to stand firm when the judgments and the barbs and the arrows are being thrown and shot your way, when the stones are being thrown your way, and you want to fight with your fists, you want to fight with murder, you want to fight with your hands and feet. But sometimes you have to learn the art of standing.
You know what? I got to tell you this. I have a friend of mine who laughs at me all the time when I should get angry, or she believes I should get angry.
Yeah.
I just smirk. And she makes this comment. She says, there's that smirk again. And she goes, what does it mean? And I always say to her, it means there's no need to do anything.
Right. Right.
And she goes, well, you're always smirking. I'm like, they're always talking. They ain't said anything.
Right.
I don't have to move just because you moved. I don't have to respond just because you spoke, particularly if it doesn't fit into my realm. You know, and the only thing I have to be sure about is if my realm is inclusive, if my realm is bringing you in. If my realm is inclusive and you're still throwing arrows, I ain't got time for that. You know, I ain't nobody got time for that. I don't even have to tell you ain't nobody got time for it. I just don't speak to you.
Yes.
I don't have to respond. So your words go where? Nowhere. You threw an arrow, it bounced off. I might have looked over and then I smirked and went on about my business.
Right. It has not unseated your authority. It is, and
it can't.
It is not right. They can't.
They can't
take it if you.
And it won't. It can't, and it won't. I had this conversation with my son, and somebody had it with me about my son. He plays college basketball. Do you know? This is his third year, his second college, and I have never spoken to any one of his coaches. One of his coaches, he was in a dispute over a scholarship. The guy brought him there on a full scholarship. He had to get rid of like 8 players, so he wanted to save money. So he calls my son in and he says, I can give you this, 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 or this. And my son says, I'll be right back. I got to tell you this. He steps out in the hallway. He calls me, tells me the situation, and I'm thinking, well, I'll fly down there tomorrow and we'll settle this. You know, Daddy will come and I'll work it out. He goes, no. And it was just as quick. Nope. I'm going to walk you through. I just want to know your opinion. Do you think that this is valid? You played college sports. Do you think his position is valid? I said, absolutely not. Do you? He said, absolutely not. I'll handle it. So he goes back turns around, walks back into the coach's office, and he says, I have but one question for you. Is that what you're going to offer me or what you can offer me?
Bam.
He said the coach got so upset that he was like, well, you're being this. And he said, I knew right then he was shady. The school was shady, da-da-da. So he transferred school. He couldn't be happier. That's the space that I teach boys to hold. You don't need daddy to hold your hand when you know how to hold your space, right?
Kingship. You got your kingship.
Oh, my gosh. And I don't
Isn't that something?
I don't want to make this a morbid thought because really it's a rejoicing thought. Based on that feedback and that conversation right there, you could have died right then and knew that your son was going to be okay in the earth.
John, I got to tell you this. Thanksgiving, he and I were sitting downstairs watching football, and I just joked with him. And I do this with him sometimes. I'm like, hey, man, how much longer you think I got left? And he laughs. Right? So we both go back and forth. I said, well, you know, I said, how are you going to take, are you prepared to take that? He goes, Dad, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be laughing and crying at the same time. And that was the best answer I could have gotten.
That's amazing.
Right? I give him a lot to laugh about.
I salute you, man.
I'm like, yeah. So that to me is good.
Kingship.
Yeah, it's kingship. And I just love the fact that he handles his business. And the only thing I am for him, I'm his magician role. I'm the advisor. Right? He's reached a point in his life where he doesn't need daddy to tell him where to go.
Right.
He needs daddy as an advisor. And there are times where he won't tell me. He goes, I've already done it.
Right. He doesn't need you to stand in front anymore.
No,
and
no,
I will plant something in both of you. My mother she was born in 1946. And so she's up there. She's 69 now. And I've told her every year, you are still in a position of teaching. I'm still taking notes. Your role might be different. I might not do what you say exactly, but I'm still watching you for the example. So that Dr. T is so awesome.
Yeah, I'm gonna build on what the first part of what you're saying about taking the arrows. Mm-hmm. It's not the water around the boat that makes it sink. It's the water that gets in the boat that makes it sink.
Yep. Good point. Love it. That's the truth. That's the truth. And you can't, I think
right. It's the water that gets in the boat that makes it sink. We are all in the water.
That's real tough.
What are you letting to get inside of you? Again, a little bit earlier, you missed it. As I said, men, how strong are you when the wind blows?
Wow.
Does it blow you over,
Yeah.
or are you grounded?
Yeah. Yeah.
What? How strong of a wind is it going to take, or can it take to blow you over? And if you're blown over, can you clean yourself up and get back up and stand up?
Yeah. And that's the lover that holds you. Dr. Vibe, you said it at the end of the show, the first segment. It's the love. Love holds you up. So, you know, and that love can be a passion for something. That can be a love of people, a love of whatever it is. But that's what's going to hold you up. And I find that people who, and we live in a society today where people will plant their feet in the ground on false philosophies, weak ideologies, group thinking, right? There's a concept called social loafing in psychology and sociology where people will gravitate towards a group of people who are carrying an idea and jump on board, right? And they will, and that's how they hold space, right? Well, you don't have to shoot an arrow from them. You can just pluck them over.
That's it.
That's not even going to push them out of the way. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. They're not holding anything firm. They're not holding anything solid. They're not holding anything that, when I look at it, 1,000 years from now, will anybody be talking about what you're talking about? Absolutely not. Get out of my way.
Right. How weak you were.
Yeah. And that's where some people I find hold their space. But those are also the ones that you can easily ignore. You've got to filter those out.
You know, tangential to this conversation is I was going back and forth on Facebook with some people earlier today, and the comment that was made on Facebook from this particular person was, you know, I never eat dinner or break bread with enemies. And I said, what happens when perhaps God places you at the table with your enemies, and or sets the table for you in the presence of your enemies? I mean, that's verse right there. Well, how will you act when you actually have to be or planted to be in the presence of your enemies? You know, will you hold space?
Part of being a king too.
Exactly.
That is.
It's just like I say when I share with young people, I say, I know most of you young people don't like being around or working with difficult people. And I say that is nonsense, because if you can work with difficult people, the more people you can work with.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Those should be the tests that we give ourselves. Those should be the tests that we're willing to endure and walk through.
Well, kings aren't afraid to be around their enemies, you know?
No, not at all.
How do you make an enemy and keep them at a distance? You know that old adage, right? Be close to your friends and keep your enemies closer.
Oh my gosh, it works.
Yeah, but the enemy, the goal for me as a king in my kingdom, I don't have to kill my enemy. My goal is to get my enemy to see that the way they're living may not be the best way to live, may not be the best way to do it. Sometimes I might learn something from my enemy. Everything about your enemy isn't all bad, right? It isn't all bad. They're there for a reason. They are some of the most powerful lessons that come from people that I've disagreed with.
I love dealing with enemies, because you know what? I learn from them. I say nothing, and I just say, just watch me.
Yeah.
I don't have to deal with you straight.
And every enemy is not evil.
No. And I can tell you what I've learned early on from addressing that, my enemies, is channeling my energy.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Channeling my energy.
Say so.
Right? Because if I can channel it and stay in that space, that's how I began to develop that thing of holding space. I wasn't thinking ahead. It allowed me to be secure. So when the fight did occur, when the battle did come on, like, dude, we don't even have nothing to worry about here. I've already weighed you, already weighed and measured. We're done. We're done, son.
Woo, I love it. Yes.
Oh, this is good stuff. Well, Dr. T, we kept you late.
Yeah, man.
So
look, I'm good to see some of our regulars.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to end off with some quick words. I'm going to give these words to the men who are listening and those who love them. They're listening either live or the replay. 2 quick things, especially because it's holiday season, and that's a whole other story in itself. Right. I'm going to give you 2 things here. Make sure you rest to sort out the truths and commitments by which you order your time. And then also schedule the seconds to make time for the moments.
Yeah.
Schedule the seconds to make. Yeah, I'm watching. You always leave some good ones, Dr. V.
That's good go right
I
there.
like that.
That's good go.
So, because remember, you can get more seconds, but you can't get any more seconds, but you can create more moments.
I like
That's
that.
real.
I like that. John, good to see you, brother.
Yeah, man. Good to see you too. Bless you,
Gentlemen,
man.
All right.
everyone who watched this, thank you so much. We'll be on again next week, and I think we're coming up to the end of the year, either next week or the week after, depending on our schedules. We're just going to say, what questions do you have for us about manhood? We'll just do an open, have you guys call in and just, we'll just take questions about manhood at the end of the year and see what we're going to say. But as always, I like to say, you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles. You're a solution for someone's problem. Thanks to everyone, especially the people who stayed on from the beginning, like Moto, JT, Van, Brown Boy Studios, Tony, everyone who jumped in. Van goes,
drop the mic and walk off the stage.
Okay, I'm dropping the mic. Be blessed. We'll see you next week. God bless.
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Be well. Bye-bye. What is up, everybody? It's Dr. Vibe here, host and producer of the award-winning The Dr. Vibe Show. I have hosted and produced over 2,000 epic conversations over the last 10 years. And what makes our conversations epic? We don't do interviews. We do conversations.